Hey, what's up everyone? I'm here to share some lessons about working with live edge slabs. I've watched a lot of YouTube videos and not all of them mention these tips, and I've learned these lessons the hard way, so here we go. Number one, just build a router jig. Oh my goodness, router jigs will save you so much time when planing a slab like this. You might think, oh, I've got a nice huge hand plane that I could use, I'm happy to do the work. No, don't do it. It'll take you forever and you will hurt your back and it just sucks. You'll save so much time if you just build a router jig from the outset. Or maybe you have a huge belt sander and you think, oh, I could load in a nice heavy grit on there and get it pretty flat. Nope. Unless your board is basically already straight, just go ahead and build the router jig. It makes such a huge difference. It'll go so much faster. Okay, and when you build the router jig, use strong pieces of wood. I've used 2x6 pieces of Douglas fir for my rails, and it's just way less flimsy. Like, here's a piece of common board that I used for my first rail on my first jig. It's just too flimsy, it bends, and that defeats the whole purpose of the jig. So use nice strong wood when building a router jig. And make sure that the elements that you use for your jig are perfectly flat on the top. So this top face here, I used the jointing plane actually to get the top face of that perfectly straight on each one of these. Then I flip them over and I run them through a planer, and you've got a perfectly matched pair of 2x6s that are dead flat, dead straight, that you use for the rails. I did the same thing for each of the beams, and you end up with a very straight router jig. Okay, next, the sled. Build the sled out of really strong wood. Here's my first router sled. I built this out of common board, and the problem with this is when you push it down a little bit, it actually bends a little bit, especially when a big heavy router is running across the center of it. And that also defeats the purpose because you end up with a cup in the center of your workpiece. So here's the router sled that I've been using lately. It's got a piece of oak for the bottom face and birch for the sides. So it's just nice, strong wood, and it doesn't bend at all. It's really great. Okay, next thing for the sled, and this makes a huge difference. Lubricate the bottom face of the sled here with some sort of wax. That will get your router just gliding across the router sled, and that makes such a huge difference. Oh my goodness, I use some of this Renaissance wax polish for that purpose. When your router glides easily across your sled, it actually makes the result better, because without wax your router will sort of gallop across the wood as it catches on the wood, and you won't have to use so much energy pushing the router across the sled, so you'll actually get a more consistent, smoother finish in your workpiece. Okay, next, at the edge of the sled, build a way to prevent the sled from falling off the rails. All I do is just attach a little hand clamp to the end. That way, if I pull the router sled this way, it can't fall off. If I don't have the clamp on there, then if I accidentally push the router sled over like this or move it a little too far to one side, the thing falls onto the workpiece, and your router will end up digging a 1-inch hole into your workpiece, and there's just no coming back from that. So, you know, you can attach a little piece of wood here to the underside, whatever it takes to just prevent your sled from falling off the rails. Okay, next thing is that folks talk a lot about shimming up the workpiece. So for example, here I've used some 2x4s and even some oak plywood here to shim up the workpiece and get it up close to the router sled. But I also like to shim up the jig itself. So you can see that I've got, here you can see it better over here. On this side I've even used few pieces of plywood and some sandpaper to space it so that it's just exactly the right height. And what I'm doing there, I just think this is nice, is I'm getting the router jig perfectly flat in all directions. So it's perfectly level across the whole length of the jig here, And then of course you just lay your level across the two guardrails, and you do that along the entire length of the jig, and you will make sure that your jig is perfectly level in all directions. And then of course you do the same thing with the slab, and you end up with a perfectly flat and perfectly level slab. I just think it simplifies the whole process if your jig is perfectly flat and then your slab is perfectly flat. Okay, cool. Happy planing, happy working. I hope this was helpful. Thanks, y'all.